It's Harsanyi time, everybody. David Harsanyi in the house, senior writer over at National Review, longtime conservative thinker, thought leader. He's skillful with the pen, or I guess with the keystroke. Mr. Harsanyi, good to have you back.
Thank you for those kind words, Buck.
Yeah, man. So, tell me this. Yeah, technically you were my first ever op-ed editor at the Blaze. So, we go way back now, almost a decade, David. I forget about this sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me this. Yeah. You are in DC right now. How are you going to feel if you go outside in a relatively suburban area of DC, get some sunshine, no one near you, and DC Metro pulls up and says, "Where's your mask, buddy? Here's a $1,000 fine."
It's crazy. I mean, I think when we start going from suggesting that people do things for the common good, which incidentally most people I think basically do, to criminalizing their lack of an action, which, it's somewhat proven. I mean, obviously you probably disagree, but I think it's helpful in mitigating it, especially inside if you're in places for a long time, et cetera. But outside, I mean, I don't think there's any science to say that, especially if I'm social distancing already, that I need to wear a mask. So
I just want to hop in, David. I don't disagree, and I appreciate the delicate way you put that. I don't disagree that there are circumstances indoors where, even if a mask is going to maybe mitigate spread 5%, okay, well, if you're near your senior relatives or someone immunocompromised, or you're going to be in close quarters for a long time, that maybe that 5% is worth it, right? And certainly in hospital settings and other situations. So I'm not an anti-masker. But I do know that outside, they have done studies. Everyone has looked at this so far and said, outside in the open air, you're posing effectively zero risk of transmission. And if we're going to start making serious mandates, I mean, $1,000 possible jail time for things that are based on an outlandish possibility, I just don't know where that stops and starts for the government.
Well, there's no end to it, I don't think. I mean, once you start jailing people or fining, these are serious fines. If you're not, for a middle class or working class person, $1,000 is rent or whatever. So these are serious fines. I think, and I think you're right. I mean, and also, by the way, private places and indoor places already put their own mandates on having to wear a mask. You can't come in my store if you don't wear a mask. I'm 100% fine with that. But outdoors, it's nuts. And where does that lead? What does that say about other things? I mean, I'm not comparing it to the flu. I realize it's much worse, et cetera, but still 40 to 50,000 people die every year. That matters too, right? Those are a lot of lives. And if you can do that sort of thing now, why couldn't you do it in other situations? I mean, that could save lives. Why don't we try it? The whole argument. But
why is the speed limit 30 miles an hour nationwide? That would save a lot. It would save a lot of lives. As a matter of fact, it would save a lot of lives. We all know that. And I would note that whenever someone brings up there's this visceral reaction to the flu comparison that you just made, and I've made it many times too. And when libs do engage on it, it automatically turns into, it's not the flu. And that's not the point, right? We're not saying it's the flu. We're not saying it's not worse than the flu. We're just saying, 40 to 50,000 or 40 to 60,000 lives separately from COVID-19, that's a lot of lives. So why don't we have all these restrictions in place?
Yeah. Here's my problem. Where is this arbitrary line where something becomes an emergency, where governors can act like dictators? Now, people are going to be mad about that because they'll say they're only doing it, to help people for the common good. But listen, most emergencies, most abuses of power come out of some real life crisis, right? So that people take power when they shouldn't. I made this point elsewhere, but the Hungarian prime minister took powers over society essentially during COVID. He's already given them back like a month ago, and the guy in California is still using them, right? What is the arbitrary number of lives saved that gives power, that says the Constitution doesn't matter, that says you can shut down churches, that says you can throw people in jail for not putting a cloth over their mouth? I just want to know, let me know how many lives are, what is the number? 40,000, 30,000, 100,000? There has to be some sort of number. Otherwise, we can just throw the Constitution to the side whenever we feel like it. And what is it worth? Not much.
I have this an example that comes to mind is, there was this move that restaurants made where they were handing out or they were selling what are called Cuomo chips. I'm sure you've seen this, where because Cuomo just says, I don't want people just sitting outside even and drinking at a restaurant. They have to be eating food. So you can't serve them alcohol. You have to serve them food as well. So then the restaurant started selling $1 potato chips or nuts, and these restaurants are barely, I know restaurants that are going through this, right? They're barely hanging on to whatever they've got. They're way behind in rent. They're at half staff. They've had to furlough or fire people. And so they say, okay, fine, we'll sell $1 potato chips. Now Cuomo has changed it. No, it has to be a substantial meal with your, and what I want to ask people is, okay, if that's now the rule, what about it has to be the three major food groups? What about it has to be a nice mixture of protein, carb, and fat, because there's a health issue there too. And people look at me like I'm crazy. I say, no, I'm serious. He's just making these determinations. There's no legislation. There's no constitution.
They look at you like you're crazy now, but 5 months from now, there'll be some. So they'll 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, 13 years ago, I wrote a book called Nanny State, where, what happens is there's always a mission creep. You say, you'll say, well, if you can do this, there's a slippery slope. And they're like, you're just overreacting. That's just crazy. You're crazy. And then like 5 months later, you're arguing about that, and they move to the next thing, And this has been happening. First, it was flatten the curve, and now it's, I'm going to throw you in jail if you don't wear a cloth on your face outside. I mean, that's a pretty big jump in 3 months. If I would have told you that you were going to fine people $1,000 and possibly throw them in jail in March, you would have laughed. They would have laughed at you and said, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. And here we are.
And now we're there. Yeah.
People want a national mask mandate. Like, what? I always want to yell at the reporter, like, under what constitutional power does the president have empowered to have a mask mandate in states? Who's going to enforce it? Is the CDC going to drop paratroopers into Wyoming? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
It's insane.
Sorry, I got worked up.
And people say this. No, dude, I'm getting fired up about it too. People say this on TV like it's intelligent. Democrats are pushing this. Even some Republicans. I mean, there's a bipartisan statism that is just mind blowing right now. And whenever you try to ask this, whenever you try to engage the debate, people just respond with this shrill hysteria. You can't talk about anything anymore. I mean, my point about the Cuomo chips, what's a substantial meal? And you might say, oh, Buck, how big a deal is this? Well, he's going to pull liquor licenses from restaurants that don't do what he says, which puts them immediately out of business. I mean, and so, if you've spent $1 million renovating a restaurant and you've put your life savings into it, Cuomo can come over and be like, and you're already on the brink of collapse and bankruptcy because of the lockdowns for the pandemic. Now he can come along and be like, you're not serving enough food with the booze you're serving. What this has to do with science is beyond anyone's comprehension. So I'm going to pull your liquor license. Now they're done. Now they're finished. And I look at that, and then he's threatening to do that, right? That's what he says he's going to do. I'm not making this up. And everyone seems to walk around like this is all okay. Are we just in a mass psychosis right now because of the real threat of COVID-19, but that I do think has been greatly exaggerated? Is that where we are? What's happening?
Well, I think that we've moved from trying to go, or maybe we never were there, but from governing with, you judiciously and diligently deal with stuff. You think about science, but you also think about the economic trade-offs involved, and you try to move forward. And now it's just turned into fear-mongering. I mean, people, most of the folks who now pretend that New York did great and everyone else has done poorly are fear-mongering. They and lying, basically, but fear-mongering. And people are susceptible to that. I'm susceptible to that to some extent.
It would be like if we were talking, and we're speaking to David Harsanyi of National Review. You should all be reading his stuff over at National Review. David, to me, it would be like if we were doing an assessment. I mean, the media is engaged in this game right now. If we were doing an assessment of natural disaster response, right? And let's say we were focusing in on how New York has done in response to a hurricane, and versus how Florida does in response to hurricanes. And New York had just suffered 30,000 dead from a hurricane that ripped through. And then Florida gets hit with a much lesser hurricane and has, 4,000 dead this month, as opposed to New York's 30,000 dead back in March and April. And everyone's saying, look at what a great job New York does with hurricanes.
It's
how,
the most despicable gaslighting I've seen in political journalism in a long time. People like Paul Krugman are doing it. This is what we can accomplish. 0 deaths today. This is what we can accomplish if only we follow the lead of Mario Cuomo, who sent a bunch of people to die in nursing homes and whose state and city of New York spread
Andrew, but yeah, Mario's the dad.
Oh, I said Mario? Now, I really hate Mario a lot.
We know who you meant.
Yeah,
yeah. So, David, I also want to ask you, I mean, you're right about the nursing home thing. That's just, it's a decision that was made that no intelligent person could have thought that was a good idea at the time. And it clearly led to a lot of people dying, and that they're pretending that Cuomo did a good job and that he's in a position to lecture anybody. This is why Democrats, I don't know what to say. Can't trust them. Let's tell people, can't trust them. But I do want to get your take on what we see going on in Portland and now also Chicago. A number of cities have come up here where it has become the dominant narrative among the Democrat Party and the national media that federal law enforcement officers are an invading army in U.S. cities. That's really what they're suggesting and saying with all this they're not allowed to come here stuff. This is beyond stupid and reckless. What is the real game plan?
Well, I just want to say it's a good segue that we can't trust Democrats. I mean, I, for a few hours the other day, fell for this idea that we had federal troops in camo, which they were in camo, but, in unmarked vans without their badge numbers, kidnapping Americans. I didn't fall for it completely, but I was like, this is kind of out of line. We can't have militarized police in cities dealing with protesters, even if they're somewhat violent like this. That's a local concern. And I still sort of believe that in general. It's a local I would leave Portland to the anarchists and their abettors in government and let them deal with it. But the idea that the federal government can't show up to protect federal courthouse buildings and federal monuments is absurd. And there was one arrest, as far as I know. I could be wrong. And the guy was released an hour and a half later. He was read his Miranda rights. He didn't want to speak without a lawyer, and they let him go. I mean, to call that an invasion, as Michelle Goldberg did in the New York Times, it's demented, right? And
these people want to be taken seriously, David, on these issues. And I know I sat in a fusion center for almost 2 years with NYPD, FBI, DHS, ICE, U.S. Marshal, you name it. This happens in cities all across the country every day. And they're helping each other on cases and backing each other up and going out on raids. It's like our journalist class knows zero about law enforcement.
I mean, the DEA, when I lived in Denver, I used to cover the drug war stuff, and the DEA was banging down doors and going into houses, and I'm not sure that the local police even knew about that. And sometimes they were undercover. Listen, I don't like the camo. Yes. There's a symbolism there. I'm not crazy about military-style things in cities, but we have to be honest here. These are rioters and terrorists quite often, not all of them, but plenty of them. They firebombed the Portland federal courthouse, or tried to. There's video of this stuff. And then they act like it's like some, Nazi army showing up. It's just, and they still pretend like it's nothing. I see reporters pretending like there's no violence, no one's doing anything. I mean, there's a quality of life issue. I'm a absolutist on free speech, right? But the people who live in these cities also have rights. You can't simply shut down entire parts of cities and not let businesses open and not let people move around and have freedom of movement. It's a disaster.
Do you think the Democrats are finally, I've been saying today that I think that they've kind of bitten off more than they can chew right now with this whole movement, all the stuff going on. Do you think that they're on defense, or am I giving the American people too much credit?
I think that because they have Trump always to just, call him a fascist and lean on Trump, and Trump often giving them, saying things that gives them some reason to do that, makes it a little easier for them. But I mean, I don't know how long this can happen in cities where people don't start to say, wait a minute, Democrats, I mean, has Joe Biden or anyone said anything about these rioters in cities? I don't think so. The only thing I can remember is Nancy Pelosi saying that sometimes statues have to come down, which is essentially, saying that the mob is okay.
Yeah, go for it. The Democrats, the recklessness and the intellectual dishonesty, just the dishonesty is pretty incredible every day. But anyway, man, stay safe, David. Don't go challenging the Antifa mob to a one-on-one. Okay, make sure that you stay indoors.
You'll be heartened to know I'm usually right here in this spot.
Good.
Never.
Good. You stay safe, buddy. David Harsanyi, everybody, nationalreview.com. Check out his latest. Also follow him on Twitter. Thanks so much, David.
Today's far left is not interested in winning debates with better arguments. They prefer to shut down debate altogether. They don't try to win the contest. They just harangue the referees to stop the game. If they don't like an op-ed, they want it unpublished. If they don't like a tweet, they want to track down the author and get them fired. If they don't like a tenured professor, they throw around Orwellian accusations that his or her ideas make them feel unsafe.
Mr. McConnell understands what's going on here. I agree. Mr. McConnell understands cancel culture. I think he's got it. I think he knows what's really going on, folks. I mentioned this top of the show. I just wanted to tell you all, the New York Times has an op-ed out. Speaking of cancel culture and what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, an op-ed that takes the position that if you form a private pod, so you bring kids together, because schools aren't going to be open because Democrats won't open them, even though the science is not with them on this. If you try to form a private, essentially study group for your kids, and according to this New York Times op-ed, you are engaged in systemic racism. That's you're not. Keep in mind, you're not in any way. They call it the editorials, the latest in segregation. That's what they're calling it. In school segregation, private pandemic pods. If they become the norm, less privileged kids will suffer. So basically, this is an editorial written by an educator in the New York Times telling you, make sure you feel a lot of guilt. If you're white, of course, white guilt. If you respond to the shutdown of schools by having study groups that your kids will be in with other kids and having certain adults lead them and effectively organize on your own what would be like homeschooling, because that will disenfranchise predominantly minority students who won't have parents who, in this editorialist's opinion, will take the same steps, do the same things. So she doesn't have, by the way, this Clara Totenberg Green, who wrote this op-ed on the latest in school segregation. Wow, that's what she calls it. Yeah. She doesn't have an answer for you as to what should be done, because what are parents supposed to do? They are trying to figure out ways to adapt to Democrats shutting down schools. She just wants you to know, feel guilty about it. Feel guilty about your kids getting ahead. That's the whole purpose of the editorial.
It's time for roll call.
I kind of like that old jazzy jazz, would that be considered big band or no? That's not big.
Yes,
band.
it's actually labeled a big band.
It is. Oh,
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I like that stuff. It's kind of fun actually. What is producer Mark's least favorite type of music?
I don't know if I have one. Maybe classical?
Interesting. I don't know if you saw the New York Times had published an editorial on how to get rid of discrimination in classical music auditions, get rid of the blind audition, meaning that it used to be that orchestras were almost entirely male, and so then they started putting up a partition and letting men and women compete just by virtue of the sound that they make with their instrument. And then women became a much bigger part of orchestras, percentage-wise, basically close to 50%, I think now. It might even be a little more. But there are not enough Black and Latino members of elite orchestras. So the New York Times editorial page wants to go back to, essentially, they found a way to not discriminate, and now they want to go back to positive discrimination. That's their view. So I don't think I talked about that on the show before. I just thought that was interesting. Because, what about different sports teams? Are we going to start saying, are we going to eliminate, athletic ability and say we need a more diverse sports team? No one ever advocates for that. It's interesting, isn't it? No one's telling the NHL where are all of your guys who are Asian American, let's say. You don't see that. Are there actually, question for you, Mark? Are there any Asian American NHL players, just out of curiosity, that you can think of?
Off the top of my head, no.
I mean, I remember Jeremy Lin in the NBA. Lin Sanity. Everybody was talking about that guy who had a huge period there of a lot of media attention. But anyway, all right. Back to roll call. Kevin, remember, go to bucksexton.com, please. Posting stuff. Also, thehill.com. I have an editorial going up there today on how the Democrats are the riot party. Please read it, click it, like it, all that good stuff. Kevin, I bought a gun in May and have not been cleared by the Colorado background check system, parts of which are suspended indefinitely for the pandemic. You see, they're already seizing our guns under the auspices of public health, and they're getting away with it, so they won't stop there. Today, it is new guns. Soon, it will be all guns. Could you clarify for me this wave of leftism? Isn't this a branch of communism? The left aren't socialists anymore. They've gone full commie from my perspective, and I think we should clearly identify them as such. Unfortunately, the commies took control of education decades ago. My 16-year-old daughter only knows the radical left agenda despite my teaching her otherwise, and in her words, it is the job of her generation to educate the rest of us. I don't see how America will survive the next 50 years with millions of wannabe revolutionaries, social justice warriors, and community organizers running wrong. Shields, Rocky Mountain High. Kevin, first of all, excellent note to us. Thank you so much. And is today's leftism a branch of communism? There are similarities with communism. There are differences with communism. And it's worth always noting that the earliest communists thought of themselves and would write of themselves as socialists in the early days of the movement. So they thought of, and Marx would write of socialism often, and that they would refer to themselves as socialists. So there's the distinctions can get very blurry. There's the clear academic definition of communism. You have to have a revolutionary committee or a central committee. Really, it's a revolution until it gets established long enough. But a central committee that makes all the determinations about the production and distribution of goods. That's a pretty broad, pretty loose definition, but that's a distinction between just general socialism. So this is why people talk about democratic socialism versus communism is really just totalitarian socialism. That might be a good way of thinking about it. Yeah. So that's what I got for you on that. And as for your 16-year-old daughter, I don't know. Hopefully she'll start paying taxes and realize that the world isn't what she's been led to believe it is by the libs. But, I don't know. I know adults. I know people that knew me before I got into politics, and they've been occasionally reaching out to me in recent months, and they're just like, I don't understand. I thought you were so nice and like smart and like you're so right wing. I'm always like, well, I guess it's was kind of a compliment, but not really. I don't know. Lewis, next up in the mix here. Buck and Mark. I'm in California. A fellow union worker turned me onto your show in the summer of 2019. I've not missed a show since. Thank you so much for what you do. Well, thank you, Lewis, man. Really appreciate that. Thank you for the loyalty to the Freedom Hut, man. Honored to have you. About the mask mandate, I believe that the left is pushing this agenda to actually spread the virus. If you think about it, when you see your doctor prepping for surgery, he or she scrubs and puts on PPE. The general public dons their PPE, then touches a number of surfaces while in public, then may touch, remove, adjust PPE without having clean hands. Just a thought. Once again, love the show and shields high. Lewis, first of all, thank you so much. As for what you're saying about PPE, I agree in part and don't see it the same way in part. On the touching of face masks and the using of face masks that may be contaminated, that originally was a major concern and one of the reasons why we were told not to wear masks, but that has since been abandoned because we're now in a mask mania and led to believe that if only we wear masks, all of this will go away. Because I think at some level also there's a deep psychological need that many people have in this country to think that it's in our hands and that if only we listen to the science, we'll all be okay. when we'll be okay, but it has nothing to do really ultimately with listening to the science. The virus is doing what the virus does. People don't like to hear that, and I understand that. I don't like to say it, but I think that's what an honest view of what has happened in the last few months would tell anybody. So yeah, PPE getting contaminated and then becoming a source of possible transmission on its own, that's a real concern. People have been bringing that up, and it makes sense. Just think it through. That makes sense, right? And then as for the next part of this, that you think the Democrats might be doing this on purpose, I can't say that I see that. I think they want lockdowns and they want masks because of the symbolism of it. I don't think that they're actively. I do believe there are a lot of Democrats that think that masks will make everything better. I think they believe it. I don't think that they're right, but I do think they believe it. So I don't think that they're doing it for the purpose that you laid out. But, I don't know everything, so we'll say that. Ryan, hey, Buck, I work at a retirement community in Virginia. We have around 200 residents and 400 staff. Since the pandemic started, we've managed to not have any residents test positive for COVID, and only 5 staff have tested positive. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid and the Virginia Department of Health have put together guidelines for us to reopen our nursing home and assisted living facility. It's a phased reopening, and in order to get us to phase 2, it was mandatory to test every resident and all staff. The National Guard came out and did all of our testing on site. The results took 5 days to get back, begging the question, why do it in the first place? If positive results come back, what good are they when the resident or staff has been exposing others around them? Love your thoughts on this. Shields high, brother. Well, Ryan, you're at the, that's kind of ground zero for where the highest risk is for the residents in the retirement community. So I'm sure you have a view of this that would be very interesting for others to know about. And as for what you're telling me about the testing lag, yeah, of course. And this is why I've been saying to you, you all know, if you listen to the show, I've been saying, just think it through, test and trace, which was a mantra repeated endlessly and mindlessly on TV, almost entirely by Democrat politicians and assorted talking heads and medical experts that the left likes, that was absurd. We've got 60,000 cases a day, which means probably 600,000 new infections every day. So how are you going to trace that? Of course you're not going to trace that. I mean, it's a joke. It's absurd. But the people that thought we would be able to trace that are still now telling you, wear a mask, do this or else. We're not supposed to pay attention to what they've been wrong about in the past, of course. So the lag in testing and also the inability to trace shows you that one of the mantras of the left on this all along is forget about being rooted in the science. It's just not rooted in rational thought. It's not possible that you're going to trace all these cases. Not even close. You can't even trace all these cases in one city. And even if you could trace them, what good would it do you? I think you're always going to be playing catch up. Okay, if you trace 1,000 cases, new cases on Monday in Miami, you traced them all. Okay, but then the next day you're going to find out that those 1,000 people have infected another 1,000 people. You try to trace that. You're always chasing after it. You're not going to get to a point where you can contain. This disease moves too quickly. And it's already too far throughout the community. So that's all you need to know with that. It really is. Okay, next up here, Mike. Hey, Buck, love the show. Tinfoil hat stuff here, but what are the odds the deep state gets Ghislaine Maxwell to testify against Trump with some phony, egregious connection to Epstein? November surprise, maybe? Mike, first of all, we love that you love the show, so thank you for that. I don't think that's going to happen, but it is a certainly creative way to think about it. I don't think that would be look, because if she testified, let's just play your theory out for a second. If she testified against Trump, she'd have to provide some kind of evidence, and if she wasn't able to, I think it would be too clear that this was a setup, that it was a ruse, a hoax, all of that. So that's where it is, and that's where we are. Thank you, Mike, for writing in. The roll call continueth with Todd. Where are the Republican fighters? Cruz, Paul, Gowdy, Trey Gowdy, Crenshaw, Graham. Come on, guys. We need you to be fighting every day. The election's only 105 days away. It's the fourth quarter, and we are losing. We need a lot of offense right now. And it seems the Republicans aren't even playing defense. They're just forfeiting. Thank you for fighting for us, brother. Shields high. Todd, endorsed, agree, co-sign. I feel like, Cruz has been stepping up and saying some good stuff recently. Graham, he's going to get the answers for us. He's going to go on Fox tonight, and he's going to get to the bottom. That's what we hear from we hear the same stuff from Lindsey Graham every day. Every day, same stuff from Lindsey. I've had enough. We're going to get answers. Sure, he's been going to get you answers for 4 years now in the Trump era. He's not getting you any answers. But, the Senate Intelligence Committee has been a waste during the whole Russia thing. Just totally MIA on all things Trump-Russia collusion. So Lindsey Graham, not exactly getting it done. I know he's on judiciary, but I'm just saying the Senate, they could do the same. They could do the same kind of review. Chopper, as in get to the chopper. Hey, Buck, love the show. I'm old enough to remember when President Obama ordered drone strikes on American citizens, and the Democrats loved it. This feigned outrage over DHS tactics in Portland is comical. Chopper, I understand, man. I get it. I'm with you. I think that there has always been a huge double standard in assessing anything from the Obama administration and what has been going on in the Trump administration. There was barely a peep from the media when Obama not only ordered the droning of Anwar al-Awlaki, but also his 16-year-old son. U.S. citizens, folks, droned, done. And everyone just was supposed to say, okay, well, Obama thought they were really bad, and they were at least in a foreign country, so no one made too much noise about it. And that is what happened. Aaron, this is so stupid. These Democrats are going against the Constitution, and they need to be called out for it, like you are doing. I've always loved listening when you talk. Very influential. Aaron, thank you so much. That's really kind of you, and we do the best we can here every day. And the good news is because of folks like you, the show is constantly growing, audience is growing, and we have more and more influence, which is what I make no secret of it. That's what I want. I want every conservative in the country to be listening to this show, this radio show, and whatever your station is, and listening to our podcast, bucksexton.com. Remember, Spotify, iHeart app. You can listen to it there. And yeah, that's my plan. That's what I hope. So thank you so much, Aaron. And yes, in terms of the constitutionality of what the Democrats are saying, what they're doing, they're horrible. How about that? They're just the worst. They are calling for national mask mandates, and I want to pull my hair out, which I won't do, of course. But I want to pull my hair out because where is that authority? And if you can give everybody a national mask mandate, how long does that last? How do you enforce that? Are we going to start locking people up for not wearing masks outside because there's some small chance that it might reduce maybe one transmission of a virus that has a 99.7% survival rate? That's really the country we're going to be living in? It's pretty crazy when you think about it. Let's see. Brian, tell me it's Eye of the Tiger you belt out to producer Mark and producer Nick to rile them up for the work. Greatness. It's the Eye of the Tiger for producer Mark, rising up to his challenge as the board op. What do you think?
I am not a board op.
Yeah, I know, but you gotta run the board.
We don't really have a board anymore.
Well, yeah, but that's under you produce all of the things.
Yeah, that's executive producer Mark to you.
Yeah, that's fair. Executive producer Mark. He's Eye of the Tiger might become his new fight song in the morning, so that may end up happening. Depends on how grumpy he is. Jenna, hey again, Buck. Craven t-shirts per your conversation. Do one with Commie Bear. I'm so in. And a Shields High. Warrior. We're working on my whole wardrobe in anticipation. Shields High. Gina, we'll get it done. Producer Mark will be in charge of design and approval. And that's how we'll roll. Everybody, thanks for being here. We'll talk more tomorrow. Shields High.